Hi, welcome to the fifth installment of 36 to Life. I'm Rabbi Jon Spira-Savett. 36 is twice 18, two times Chai. Chai means life. And we're using some brief looks at teachings from classic Jewish sources about Teshuvah as a way of looking back on one life, the life we've led in this past year, and looking ahead to another life, the one we hope to live in the coming year. We are at the beginning of chapter 2 of Rambam's Hilchot Teshuvah, the guide for Teshuvah of Rabbi Moses Maimonides. And we're looking at really the definition of Teshuvah in the sense of how do you know whether you've done it or not? How do you know whether you should look at yourself as looking back on your actions and trying to do something different or reflecting on it and know that then you can say that that is Teshuvah. And in the previous teaching, the first half of chapter 2, teaching number 1, Rambam laid out a kind of ideal definition. And now we're going to take a look at what Rambam says is the is what happens if you're kind of somewhere short of that, what that is considered. So in the Hebrew, we're over here where I've got the pointer and more toward the top in the English column. Ve'im lo shav ela bimei ziknuto. If one had only done tshuva in a time of old age, uve'et she'i efshar lo la'asot ma shehaya oseh. And at a time when it's not possible to do that thing which the person had done before. I'm not entirely positive if they mean and or, meaning at a time of life when it's not possible to do the same wrong, or that's an alternative. Maybe maybe old age is a time, and maybe there are other times in life when just we're for some reason or another not liable or susceptible to the same kind of wrong as before. Afal pisha ena tshuva me'ula, even though that's not a highest tshuva, mo'elet hi lo. That tshuva is effective for that person. Uval tshuvahu, and that person is considered a bal tshuva, literally a master of tshuva, or a person who you can look at and say that person has done tshuva. Afilu avar kol yamav, even if a person has done wrong all of their days. Ve'asat tshuva biyom mitato, and did tshuva on the day of their death. Umeit b'tshuvato, and died in that tshuva, whatever that means. Kol avonotav nimchalin, all of the wrongs are forgiven. And Michlal, just skipping down a little bit to the bottom of this teaching, Michlal she'im zachar bor'o v'shav kodem she'amut nislachlo. This teaches that if a person remembered their creator and did tshuva before they died, that person is forgiven. I think to just back up on this, we want to say that the kind of forgiveness that we're talking about is forgiveness before the divine. This is not about forgiveness between people that Rambam is talking about right now, but saying kind of in terms of how one's soul is or one's state is, cosmically speaking, or just in the presence of the divine, whatever that might mean to you, that there is a possibility of doing tshuva as long as one is alive, even until that last moment. And so Rambam is saying a couple of things, that there is a high standard of tshuva to do in one's lifetime, and at the same time, it is never withheld to do tshuva. Tshuva is always possible. And just because the moment has passed when you might have been in the same situation, or when you might have had the kind of capacities or predilections that caused you to tilt in a certain bad direction, just because those things aren't there anymore, doesn't mean that you can't conjure them or reflect on them and think about that and be in a state of tshuva. And so partly I think Rambam is trying to answer a question of, well, the high bar of complete tshuva, where you really are like in the same situation and reflect on it and make a completely free choice out of one's will, that is a really high standard. And how are we ever going to get to that? So I think Rambam is saying, tshuva mo'elet. It's still a kind of effective tshuva to do things that are short of that, and particularly when you sort of look from the present forward and you say, well, I can only do tshuva from where I am. It's not a permission to wait until later times, or to push it off, or to wait until the day of death. I know a lot of people have trouble with this teaching, particularly because of this idea that a person might wait and want to be forgiven in the eyes of humanity. And I think this is a different question. I think that one's coming up in later teachings. I think that it's hard to make that distinction, and I think maybe conceptually it's been important for Rambam all along to distinguish between kind of confession in the presence of the divine, and forgiveness and Teshuvah in the presence of the divine. And those things are different from the interpersonal processes of forgiveness. And but I think Rambam's trying to establish some definitions so that then he can talk a little more about the interpersonal psychology. So we might wonder as we think about these teachings, is it important to make those distinctions? Is there a kind of tshuva that is just between me, my soul, and the divine, that is worth thinking about? That's not in connection with the repair that we do to other people. I think that sometimes the most that can be said for this kind of approach is to say that there are times when forgiveness is not possible, but tshuva might be possible. And it's not about the human judgment, or not about the repair, which maybe you don't deserve to be able to do, or don't deserve to be forgiven by other people, but nonetheless that one should continue to strive to do tshuva in whatever way one can, with whatever capacities and whatever context. And that may be what Rambam is trying to get at here in this particular teaching. Here in the last couple of looks at the two pieces of that teaching, we have really a definition of tshuva. And coming up, Rambam is going to describe more what that process is, and that kind of process of inner moral psychology. And you can see how that begins to fit together, or whether it's things that kind of slide in some tension with each other. But again, the thought here is to think about what is it when it's tshuva, just me thinking about myself and me thinking about my place in the cosmic scheme, or the scheme of the universe? How can these definitions of partial tshuva, of complete tshuva, of tshuva that might not be perfect but is still effective in some way, what might that mean? And you're welcome to post any comments or thoughts about that, and we'll continue on when we take a look at the next teaching.